of our mobile contestants. As we said, the mobiles have actually been judged on their underlying technologies over the last few weeks. So these quick presentations were just to give a sense of what they've been working on. Our next speaker is a wonderful speaker we're very pleased to agree to speak with us again this year. Gave a very insightful and intriguing talk last year. Professor Boaz Ganor, Dean of the Lauder School of Government at IDC and founder of the International Terrorism Center there. Boaz, please, if you'd come up.
חד.
We can do without the Q&A and just go through your...
Okay, so give me a cue 5 minutes before.
Good.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Actually, I hate to be the one who stops these geniuses from showing their capabilities in technology. I was fascinated with what I've seen. And I would like now to take you to another point of view, if you wish, the point of view of countering the phenomenon of terrorism, and then you can maybe suggest how to overcome the gaps that I might present to you in my presentation. I chose the subject of the art of counterterrorism as an opening statement to my presentation today, because as weird as it might be sound, I would like to argue that counterterrorism is an art. And everybody who's dealing with counterterrorism, from decision makers through special and security agencies, and up to technological entrepreneurs that deals with counterterrorism, needs to be artists in order to be able to contend with this changing, dynamic and growing threat, which is called terrorism. So I would like to suggest a few points, or to stress a few points that reflects the concept of the art of counterterrorism. And the little PR never hurts. The recent 2 books which I wrote, The Counterterrorism Puzzle and Global Alert, actually, of course, elaborate on many of the issues that we will discuss today. The first challenge that the artist of counterterrorism has is to define who's the enemy and what is the threat. Even the basic concept of the term technology, the term terrorism, is not agreed by professionals, by legal experts, by politicians all over the world. What is terrorism? Here we have a conference on counterterrorism, we have technologies of counterterrorism, we have scholars of counterterrorism, we have security resolution against terrorism, but there is no one acceptable definition of the term. What is terrorism all about? Actually, most of the people around the world agree that there is no way to achieve an objective definition of the term terrorism. Why? Because, and I'm sure you heard this slogan time and again, because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. Because terrorism is a subjective issue. Because whoever I define as terrorist because he's conducting this or the other types of attacks against me, I would define him as a freedom fighter, for example, or revolutionary, if he's doing the same thing to my enemy. And I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that countries and states and leaders like Erdogan in Turkey does define the PKK as a terrorist organization, but it's not being regarded as a terrorist organization by other states. At the same time, Erdogan do not refer to Hamas as a terrorist organization. Hezbollah is being regarded as a terrorist organization only by very few number of countries around the world. So who's the terrorist? What is terrorism all about? I won't get into that too deep, but I would say this is the first pillar of the art of terrorism and counterterrorism. How can we agree on one definition of terrorism? I would like to zoom in a little bit more on the question of who are the terrorists? Who are the perpetrators? for the sake of the argument, let's say we solve the problem of what is terrorism all about, but who are the perpetrators of the terrorism? And I would like to suggest to differ between three types of perpetrators, or three types of groups of perpetrators of terrorist attacks. The first type is what you mainly know under the name of lone wolves. I refer to that as a personal initiative attack. A personal initiative attack, it's an attack that starts and ends with the sick mind of one person. A person has been radicalized, a person made a decision that he wants to conduct the attack, he planned the attack, and then he executed the attack. Sometimes, by the way, this lone wolf refers to himself as the long arm or a follower, or maybe even an activist of this or the other terrorist organization, of Daesh, of Al-Qaeda, of Hezbollah, or whatever. But he was not appointed as such. He's not really part of the organization. He doesn't get any operational command from the terrorist organization. If I need to give a few examples, I would give the 2014 attack in Brussels against the Jewish Museum by Mahdi Namouche, a lone wolf, and another type of a lone wolf, Mohammed Mra, that conducted the attack against the Jewish school in Toulouse in 2013. Those types are the lone wolves attack. We in Israel, as you all know, have experienced this phenomenon, a growing phenomenon of lone wolves attacks, mainly stabbing attacks, and I will refer to that in a moment. The second group of perpetrators are the local initiatives attacks, or the independent networks. The independent network, practically, it's a group of not that lonely, but lone wolves. Meaning, usually it's a couple, 2 people, 3 people all together. It could be a husband and a wife, like in the case of San Bernardino, that have been radicalized together and then prepare themselves the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, and conducted the attack. Nobody actually sent them to the mission. They might be influenced by incitement, by radical material, propaganda, and so on and so forth, but this is their initiative. Still independent from the terrorist organization. Another type of an independent attack would be the Kawachi brothers that conducted the attack in Charlie Hebdo newspaper in Paris as well. A different ball game is the organized attack, the third type of the group of perpetrators of terrorist attacks. The organized attack is the 9/11 type of an attack, or the Zaventem attack in Brussels recently, or the November 13 attack in Paris. This is much more organized, lethal, and actually causing much more damage and casualties than any other type of an attack. It's well initiated, planned, prepared, and executed by a terrorist organization. The terrorist organization, once decides to conduct such an attack, has usually one of the 2 tracks to fulfill this initiation of the attack. The first way is by using a group, using a cell, which is an infiltrating cell. The cell is being recruited, prepared, trained outside the target, outside the country that is being targeted, and then sent to be infiltrated into the other state. One of the best examples would be 9/11 attack, if you wish. The other option for organized attacks is the sleeper cell. A terrorist organization recruit the terrorists, train them, and then smuggle them into the target country, let them stay there. It could be for a long period of time, could be months, could be years, and then one day they're being called to conduct this specific attack. Now, this is crucial to differ between those types of attacks because of many reasons. First of all, I would like to give you, in the comparison between the personal initiative attack, the lone wolf attack, and the organized attack, I would like to give you good news and bad news at the same time. The good news is that usually lone wolf attacks are much occurring or conducting much less casualties than any other type of an attack, of an organized attack. The number of people that are being killed or injured by a lone wolf is very limited. And we saw this in Israel with not underestimating any harm that those people are causing, at the end of the day, they kill 1 or 2 or 3 and injure a few people altogether. You cannot compare that to the recent attack, the organized attack in Brussels or in Paris or in any other place around the world. So usually it's less lethal, but that's the good news. The bad news is that usually it's impossible to prevent this type of an attack. And I'm saying usually because in a minute I'll show you that maybe I would like to differ with myself. Until recently, most of the experts of terrorism would tell you that you cannot prevent a lone wolf attack because you don't have the technology that gives you the ability, or the modus operandi, the doctrine, that gives you the ability to infiltrate to the sick mind of one person. The person that is being radicalized and then decides to initiate the attack. He doesn't share this information with anybody. He doesn't communicate with everybody. Human sources intelligence, communication intelligence is not useful here because there is no communication whatsoever. It's between him and himself. Usually even the immediate surrounding would not know about this, anything. The family, the friends. That's the problem. Security agencies relies on the communication, relies on the fact that they can tap the phone, they can infiltrate an agent into a terrorist organization and then monitor what they are planning to do and so on and so forth. You cannot do that with a lone wolf attack. Again, something has changed in the last few months, at least in my view, based on the experience that we have in Israel, that put a question mark next to this statement that I gave you, that it's impossible to prevent and to know about lone wolf attack before they occurs. The second challenge of counterterrorism, the second pillar of this art of counterterrorism, is what I refer to the rationale of counterterrorism, or the rationale of terrorism before the rationale of counterterrorism. When I say the rationale of terrorism, I would like to argue a statement that might sound weird to your ears, people which are Israelis or coming from Western countries altogether. I would like to argue that terrorists in general, and I'm generalizing here, I would like to argue that terrorists in general are rational actors. I would like to argue that terrorists in general are conducting a rational decision-making process. Now, what is a rational decision-making process? A rational decision-making process is a process in which one has few alternatives that he needs to choose from. He's calculating the costs and benefits of each alternative, and he's choosing the alternative which he believes is more beneficial than costly. That's a rational decision-making process. That's what terrorists are doing, definitely. Leaders of terrorist organizations. I would even argue that the individual suicide attacker that is volunteering to the mission of conducting a suicide attack, and what can be more irrational in our eyes than conducting a suicide attack? A person who is ready to kill himself just in order to kill others. I would argue that even those perpetrators of suicide attacks are conducting rational decision-making process. So the challenge of counterterrorism is to understand that the rationality of the terrorist is a subjective rationality. It's in the eye of the beholder. Their calculus of cost-benefits is different than yours and different than mine. Actually, there is no calculus of a terrorist. There is no generic calculus of terrorist or terrorist organization. Why? Because the calculus, the cost-benefit calculus of Hezbollah is different than the cost-benefit calculus of Hamas. It's different than the calculus of Al-Qaeda. It's different than the calculus of Jabhat al-Nusra, Daesh, and you name it. I would argue more than that. It's also dynamic because the calculus of Hamas today is different than the calculus of Hamas 6 months ago. There are different calculations that he would conduct, and it will be different again in 6 months. This is why the art of counterterrorism is never-ending job. You don't just have the challenge to get into the mind of the terrorists. You need to, all the time, try to comprehend what are the factors that are being changed in this calculus of cost-benefit, and therefore understand the rationale. Now, I was talking about the rationale of an organized attack or an organization of a terrorist organization. When we are talking about the rationale of the lone wolf, it's even more difficult to comprehend. And look at those pictures. Those are 4 pictures that I've taken from different lone wolf attacks that have been conducted in the recent 6 months in Israel. The common denominator of those 4 pictures that have been taken seconds after the perpetrator of the attack have been captured. And you see the common denominator on the faces of the 4 individuals that conduct those attacks. They are all smiling. And it's not a coincidence. This is actually a reflection of what I would argue certain type of satisfaction. The satisfaction is that they actually fulfill their calculation of cost benefit. They see it very beneficial. Although they are now going to jail, maybe they're going to be sentenced for life term in jail, but still they are quite satisfied with the outcome because based on their calculus of cost benefits, that's exactly what they wanted to achieve. That's the challenge, trying to understand this concept. And this actually gives me the opportunity to zoom in a little bit more into the lone wolf phenomenon. When we are talking about the lone wolf phenomenon, we are talking about different types of modus operandi. And mainly we are talking about sabotage, stoning, Molotov cocktail, stabbing, running down, or car accidents if you wish, bulldozing, shooting, and bombings. There is one type of an attack which is missing here. And this is the suicide attack. Now, what I'm trying to suggest here, this classification between lone wolf attacks, independent network, and organized terrorism, it's not just a theoretical discussion. This is very practical because you need immediately after attack occurs, definitely even before that, but after an attack occurs, you need to make a decision. What is the nature of this attack? Is this a lone wolf attack? Is this a local independent attack, or this is an organized? Because the way that you need to behave from now on in looking for people that supported and helped this attack, maybe to put roadblocks, maybe to use forensic, and so on and so forth, dependent on the nature of the attack. Few minutes after the attack occurred a few weeks ago in Brussels, I was invited to be interviewed on the Israeli TV. And next to me was an outgoing high-ranking officer coming from Shabak, from the Israel Internal Security Service. And first they approached him and they asked him, what do you say about this attack? Again, it was 2 or 3, 20 or 30 minutes after the attack. He didn't know more than anybody else about the attack. I didn't know more than anybody else about the attack. We knew that there were a few attackers, probably suicide attack, and many casualties altogether. And he said, you know, we need to understand this attack within the overall realm of what is happening in Europe today. And what we see is enormous radicalization process. We see immigration, wave of immigration. We see people that have been radicalized and conduct lone wolf attacks and time and again. And this is part of this approach. And when I was asked, what do you think about it? I said, I see it totally different. Why? Because based on the analysis that we have conducted, all suicide attacks in the world until today, with one exception, maybe we'll get to that later on, but all suicide attacks around the world were not personal initiative attack. All of them were organized attack. There was an organization that initiates the attack, planned, recruit, prepare, and execute the attack. Therefore, if we learn a few minutes after the attack in Brussels that this was a suicide attacker, I already can tell you that this is not a lone wolf attack. You need to prepare to something else, maybe secondary attacks, maybe third, because it's not a lone wolf. This is an organized phenomenon. Now, I call those people, the terrorists, the jihadist zombies. The reason that I use the term jihadist zombies is double. Actually, one is because it clings to the youth today around the world. They are interested in zombies. They know what a zombie is. And I would like, and this is the main thing, I would like actually to take advantage of the fact that people despise, hate this phenomenon of zombies, and to show the way that those people are conducting those attacks without any honor. They are trying to gain honor, And I would actually try to humiliate them by using the term the jihadi zombies. I'll show you another jihadi zombie that was conducted an attack in Rationale, not far from here, a few months ago. This is the guy with the red shirt, and you could see how he attacks those innocent people on the bus stop, exactly like a zombie would do in a horror movie altogether. You would say, okay, this is an Israeli problem. No, it's not. Actually, this is another jihadi zombie in the United Kingdom. Two people that attacked a soldier, a British soldier in London, the Lee Rigby soldier, and actually butchered him, assassinated him in the middle of the streets of London. You can see his body lying down there. Now, those zombies didn't run away after they conducted the attack. They stayed there with their hands full with his blood, and they were bragging to every person with a camera about what they did, about the reasons, about why it's important for them as Islamists to get this revenge and regain the honor that they are expecting for. And I'll give you another example in the United States, even not that far away. It's in 2014, in which Lee Thompson, taking an axe, this is a Christian that converted to Islam, have been radicalized over the internet, and then decides to take an axe and to behead NYPD officers in New York. Now, I said before that this is impossible, or used to believe that it's impossible to have a prior intelligence on the plans, the intentions, and the warnings of a lone wolf terrorist attack. I beg to differ with myself. Every Israeli in the room would understand, because we are always differing with ourselves. So I would say that in the last 6 months, in the last wave of lone wolf's attacks, we have found something that came to me by surprise. I learned that when we talk about lone wolf attack, there is a replacement for human and comment. There is something that fills in the gap of the lack of human sources intelligence and the lack of communication intelligence. And this is OSINT, open sources intelligence. Actually, I cannot tell you the exact number of the exact percentage, but I would guess that it is close to about 50% of the lone wolves that conducted the attacks in the last 6 months in the wave in Israel gave prior warning on the wall, on the social networks, on their open sources communication. And I'll give you a few examples. One of them is Ishak Badaran, which actually showed himself bragging with an ISIS ring on his Facebook wall before the attack was conducted. Another one, Fadi Alun, again in October 2015, was writing on his wall, in the name of Allah, the merciful and compassionate, oh Allah, today I decided to achieve shuhada, martyrdom, and the victory to Allah. What's more than that? I mean, if there would be a source, intelligent source that would give you this would be the golden piece of information that you're looking for. And there are many, many other examples. The internet is, as you know, also being used for tutorials, for educating the lone wolves and terrorists in general. For example, which knife to use, how to buy a regular knife and make it more lethal and more dangerous than a regular, how to stab the imam who's teaching over the video, how to stab in a way that will not be able to recover from. And then also the internet is being served as a model of imitation. When a terrorist dies or being captured, their profile is being used by terrorist organizations and their supporters to incite others to conduct the same thing. So when we're looking over the internet, you could see that there is a vicious circle here that starts with the intentional incitement of this or the other terrorist organization. The incitement is inspiring people that later would become lone wolves. They are being radicalized. And then one day when they are radicalized enough, they decide to initiate and to plan an attack. And then in many cases, they put a justification or political statement that actually hint and give you a prior warning before they conduct the attack. And once they do that, they become an imitation model and serve as fertilizers to further incitement and further radicalization process. So this is a perpetuum mobile type of activity that at the end of the day creates an epidemic phenomenon or an epidemic outcome. That's the bad news. The good news is that this is transparent. And actually, there are at least 3 points that gives you the ability to infiltrate into that process and to monitor that. And in one case, at least, the justification give you an early warning before the attack occurs. I'll skip that because we are short in time. When we talk about this radicalization process, we actually can figure out and find out exactly what are the messages which are being conveyed to Muslims all over the world, especially immigrants within Western countries. And it starts with building up on the frustration that in many cases is already very well rooted in those communities. Asking the question, who am I? Am I an Algerian who's living in France? Am I a Moroccan who's living in Spain? Or am I a Pakistani who's living in United Kingdom? Who the hell am I? And the answer is, wait a minute, you are not this or that. You belong to something which is much bigger than everything else. You are part of the Ummah, the greater nation of Islam. So join us and you will be part of something which is much stronger and solve all your dilemmas that has to do with self-identity altogether. And then, of course, in order to intensify that, they glorify the history of Islam. Don't ask the question, am I a Moroccan living in Spain? Because you know why? There is no such a place which is called Spain. Spain is Andalusia. Andalusia used to be a Muslim territory that was conquered by the Europeans. You have the right to live there much more than the Western, the Christians, which are living there. Furthermore, we are talking mainly about youngsters, and I don't know if you have youngsters at home. I have, and youngsters have many dilemmas and many questions that they ask themselves, and they need clear answers, black and white, but good and evil. And those people practically supplies in their propaganda exactly those clear answers. It's either you with us or against us. It's either you are part of the greater nation of Islam or you are our enemy. You cannot be neutral in this conflict. And in order to make it clear, they always build up conspiracy theories. And the conspiracy theory, usually it's we are under attack. We, the greater nation of Islam, is now being attacked. You need to come up and defend Islam against those that want to humiliate us, wants to harm us, and you need to revenge on that. And by the way, if you are not persuaded enough, it's not me who's telling you to do so. It's not me, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, or Zawahiri, or whoever. This is God's will. This is a fatwa. This is a divine command, and we just introduce it to you, and you need to obey to that. And by the way, if you think that you can do it after you finish your schooling or getting your first million, forget about it. We are now fighting a defensive war, and we need to defend Islam now. Therefore, you need to do it right now. There is a sense of urgency to save Islam from those who want to humiliate and attack them. Now, another concept I want to introduce to you in reference to ISIS. Unfortunately, I don't get a dime from Coca-Cola, but I use the advertisement of Coca-Cola to explain that why. Because the slogan of Coca-Cola for so many years was, we are the real thing. Compared to whom? Compared to Pepsi-Cola. Now, I believe that the concept of we are the real thing explains the evolution of modern terrorism. And for example, if we take the IRA, which was very active in the 70s, in the 80s, then gave birth to the provisional IRA, then signed the Good Friday deal, and ended its terrorist activity, but gave birth to the real IRA, those that refers to their ancestors as traitors, as those who doesn't fulfill the real goals of IRA. They are the real IRA. PFLP, or those the Israelis in the room, this is George Habash organization, the Palestinian Front of Liberation of Palestine, gave birth to the Palestinian Front Liberation of Palestine General Command, the real thing, which is Ahmed Jibril. Ahmed Jibril is a daughter organization of George Habash. Hamas refers to themselves as the real thing of Fatah. The Fatah are the traitors, we are the real thing. I would like to argue, and I gave this explanation just in order to argue that ISIS is becoming the real thing of Al-Qaeda. And what actually I practically show in this transcript is that we are talking about a fashioned thing. Terrorism, 5 minutes. Terrorism is a fashion. And therefore, the challenge is to deal and to comprehend this fashion. I have to share with you an anecdote, although I have only 5 minutes. A good friend of mine, many years ago, used to have one of the biggest nightclubs in Tel Aviv. He invested millions of shekels in building the most VIP nightclub in Tel Aviv. All the actresses and the VIP people went there. After a year or so, I was reading in the newspaper that just next to him, few blocks away, they are now building a bigger nightclub, they invest much more money in this nightclub, and this is going to be the real thing, the real nightclub in Tel Aviv. I was so surprised to read in the newspaper that the one who's investing the money and actually building the new nightclub is my friend that is the owner of the old nightclub. So I called him and I said, why are you doing that? You are wasting so much money. He said, look, I'm in a fashionable business. And therefore, the people need every 2 years or so a new nightclub. They are looking for that. I don't want any other entrepreneur that will actually steal my customers for me. I will steal them for myself and I will keep them with me. That's the way that we need to think about this phenomenon of the evolution of modern terrorism. And you could see here that ISIS is actually spreading all over the world. We are focusing on Iraq, we are focusing on Syria, and ISIS practically is now having roots all over the world, in the Maghreb country, in Libya, in Mali, and other places like a balloon. If you strangle it in Syria and Iraq, it will pop up in Europe, it will pop up in other places altogether. I'll skip that. And I would conclude with two other dilemmas very briefly. One is what I refer to as the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism. Very crucial to all the entrepreneurs which are sitting here. Because one of the biggest challenges is not to invent the new technology in counterterrorism. This is a huge challenge. But how to do that without harming liberal democratic values? This is the democratic dilemma in counterterrorism. Like it or not, there is a contradiction between our values and our security. Some people turn a blind eye. President Obama, in his first inauguration speech in 2008, said something along the lines that we regarded as false, that there is a contradiction between our values and our security. He wouldn't say this today, no doubt, after the Apple case and other cases as well. There is an immediate contradiction between efficiency in counterterrorism and guarding liberal democratic values. So the art of counterterrorism is how practically do you find the real balance between the two, knowing that you need to sacrifice some of your values in order to secure you and your own people, and you need actually to sacrifice some of your security in order to stay liberal and stay democratic, because if you don't do that, you play into the hands of the terrorists. Another pillar of the art of counterterrorism, last but not least, is what I refer to as the role of the public, of public resilience in counterterrorism. At the end of the day, terrorism, regardless where it happens, has one goal, and the goal is not to kill. The goal is to create fear and anxiety, to spread fear and anxiety. Terrorism wins when people are under anxiety, when they change their day-to-day activity, their life activities, and so on and so forth. So countering that, creating resilience, this is a pillar of counterterrorism. And I really would end with a last anecdote. In the 90s, we had a wave of suicide attacks in Israel, and after one of those attacks, suicide attack that occurred in Tel Aviv, it was Thursday afternoon, I got a phone call from a journalist, American journalist, I believe. And he, a few minutes after the attack, asked me the regular question that you ask a counterterrorism expert about terrorism. Who do you think did that? Why now? What would be the challenges that now needed to be taken into consideration? Many, many questions. And then he surprised me with the last question. He said, and what are you going to do about that? So I said, what do you mean? Me personally or Israel? He said, no, you personally. What are you going to do about this attack right now? I said to him, look, it happens a few minutes ago. Now, it's Thursday afternoon. Every Thursday afternoon, when I was younger, I used to play basketball. Now, I don't know who was hurt in this attack. Maybe it was friends of mine, maybe even my family. We don't know yet who are the victims and how many and so on and so forth. I'm not in the mood to play basketball. But I'm going now to play basketball because this is my personal expression of resilience. I'm not going to let those villains, those terrorists, changing my own plans just because they conducted a terrorist attack. And I think this is what is public resilience and counterterrorism altogether. I will end by showing you the article that he wrote. He gave a caricature of me playing basketball as if it's counterterrorism, fighting terrorism on the basketball court. Thank you very much.
Thank you, yeah. We know where you're heading now. Play some basketball.